mean, seriously, that's a pretty scary thing. I'm going to start something, I know where the destination maybe is going to be, but I have no idea when I'm getting there. But that was a very good life lesson, and that's what this HBIC process was for me. Was really about, I'm going to keep starting, and I'm going to keep going. I don't know exactly where the destination is or when it's going to be there. So there was no box to fit into.
Welcome to Fear with Christine Spratley. Living like a head in charge, the podcast where Christine says fear, questions everything, and takes bold action. Christine Spratley is a former professional boxer, nanny, and 29-plus year corporate warrior turned founder of HBIC Advisors, where she is a public speaker and coach. She's been saying fear her whole life, many times without even realizing it. So tune in, spread the word, and get ready, because this isn't about aging with grace. It's about aging with mischief, audacity, and having a damn good story to tell.
Tabs, what's up, bitches? Welcome back to the second episode of Fuck Fear with Christine Spratley. That's me, living like an HBIC. And me, myself, and I often say we, and that's who I'm talking about. Although Joe's here in the studio with me, so he's here as well. Last episode, we talked a little bit about kind of HBIC, head bitch in charge. And we didn't dive into that. I gave you a little bit about the garage moment where we pulled into the garage. My husband looked at me after I'd been miserable, I think for probably about a couple of years, and said, "You're not happy. And what are you going to do about that? And I can't just it can't be all me." So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, how I got there, how HBIC came about, what it means to be an HBIC, and why you may not think you are one or why you qualify for one. And the title of this actual episode is Ain't No Box Big Enough. And what I want to get very, very clear is you don't fit into a box. So anyway, I didn't. Maybe you do, but I didn't. And I didn't even realize that I was trying to fit into boxes. I was trying to fit into boxes I didn't even know existed. And every time I'd climb out of one, I thought I climbed into another one. And I didn't know that for a long time. And so this episode is about finding out what makes me happy. And part of that is understanding and owning being an HBIC. So if you didn't listen to the last episode, what that night was like is we came home. I can't remember where we came from, probably from eating out, because we were eating out all the time. I don't know if we were two adult working all the time, kids in college. So it was like work all the time, go eat, work all the time, go eat, come home, me watch sports, him upstairs watching documentaries. Like that was our rhythm. And so we pull in the garage one night and he just is like, you're really unhappy. And I knew for a long time that I was unhappy with my job. Now, I had an amazing career in doing corporate negotiations for economic incentives. And I fell into it, like I did most things. I fell into it because I was getting ready to graduate college, and I was needing to get a job, and I was boxing at the boxing gym. And I thought I was going to go graduate University of Texas and government major, and I was going to get a job in Paris or Britain or somewhere cool. And the only jobs that I could find were in Bogota, Colombia. And I don't know about people, but if you remember in the early 90s, that was not the place for a little white girl from Iowa to be. And that scared the shit out of me. So I was working, one of the women that worked out there was Sarah Crocker, and she ran Crocker Consulting, was a land development firm, and said, "Hey, you can be a runner." And that's how I started my career. So the reason why I bring that up is because I'm going to talk about, again, at 50-something, I'm here looking at what makes me happy from a career perspective. But I had an amazing career. And again, it just maneuvered and worked my way through into it. But that night when I had to kind of look at myself, and I should be doing that all the time, or I shouldn't say we. I should be doing that all the time. And it's not a big deal when you do it all the time. It's like, like when you go to the dentist, Joe, and it takes them an hour to clean your teeth
Yeah.
versus 30 minutes or 20 minutes. And they use the water gun instead of just scraping it a little bit and it hurts like hell. That's kind of what it's like. If you don't look at what you're doing and check out where you're at in your happiness buckets and your fulfillment buckets, then it becomes this big thing. So the more I do it, the more I encourage my listeners, you guys just do it. Check it out. Look under the covers. See if you're happy in this element of your life. So
Why do you think so many people are afraid to ask themselves that question? Because I think I would imagine a lot of people don't want to even go down that road because maybe they think it's because they kind of know the answer.
I'll tell you what I think, and I'll tell you what it was like for me. I didn't want to go down the road for two reasons. One, I knew it was change. I didn't want change. I didn't want a different job. I was 29 years of career. Like, I had built a reputation. It's funny how you don't realize, or I don't realize, how attached I become to things until someone suggests they remove those things. Like, get a new job with a different title in a different industry. Like, sell your house and downsize. Like, you're tight. I like to pretend that I'm not attached to things until you start taking that shit away, and then I become a 2-year-old and going, that's mine.
Right.
And so I think part of it is we know that there's an opportunity there, that the answer could mean I need to change some stuff that I may not be really willing to give up. I was afraid, especially being the age that I was afraid I wouldn't know. Like, if I really stopped and asked myself what makes me happy, I wouldn't know. I remember I was working at EY, and I was doing all the things, doing all the right things that I thought I should be doing. And we had this innovation council or something came out. It was like when innovation, that I can't remember how long ago. It was at least 7 or 8 years ago. Innovation was the thing. And I remember you're supposed to, figure out where you could be innovative and put it in a box. And I thought, I am just not innovative. Now, what I didn't realize is I had chosen to not be innovative, because when I start being creative and start asking questions and why and what makes me happy, or, looking at things from different avenues, then all of a sudden the creative monster comes out and I don't have control over where that idea goes. Meaning I could start looking at my home life. I could start looking at my relationships with my friends and my girlfriends, and then things could change. And so for me, I was concerned that I, one, didn't know what was going to change. And when you start asking why and you're left with a truth that you don't want to deal with, that's hard. But two, I was afraid maybe I wouldn't know. So again, that's a little bit about where we're going to go today, is how I found out. One thing I did was, again, I thought it was just my job and the rest of my life was fine. And so that's where we started. And I was going through the pandemic, and for some reason I got on Headhunter's list, and there was this, I don't even know what she was, but she put me on this, she sent me this email and it said, hey, if you're unhappy in your job, come listen to this podcast. I don't even know if it was a podcast. It was a webinar. And she was in Britain. So there was a bunch of us on. She was in Britain, and it was a Zoom call, and the presenter was in Denmark. And I don't know what all was said, but I walked away. There was one thing that I walked away with. And that's why I like listening to things all the way through, is because I don't know what I'm going to walk away with. But it may be at the last 3 minutes of a podcast, so better listen all the way through, where I go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. Anyway, he said, if you don't know what you have no clue what you want to do, a good thing to do is do this survey. And I do it in my coaching. I've given this survey to people. I've asked them to fill it. I've asked them to do it. It's a survey that says, if Christine wasn't doing what she was doing, if she was not in the industry and she didn't do this work, what would she be doing? What would you, and you had to list like 5 things. What would you hire her for? What does Christine think she's great at that she sucks at and you would fire her over, or you wouldn't hire her for? What does she love and what makes her happy? let me see, what was the other question? The other questions were, give me an example of when you've seen her succeed and be happy. And then the bomb question at the end were, what really do you want Christine to do that she doesn't think she can do? And so the criteria, though, for this survey was to give it to people that had known you for at least 10 years or so. And it couldn't be your husband, and it couldn't be like your bestie. They had to be people that you had that. And I was fortunate that I had enough, I had a work husband, and I had some friends from work. And then I had also, one of the things that I loved about my career is I've been blessed with meeting a lot of people, and those people are still in my life today from when I first started. And so I sent it out to them. What it did was it showed me options. And all these things came back from, I'm a sports nut, go Steelers. Anything Pittsburgh is the way to go. So I had a ton of sports things. Then I had a ton of, I do negotiations and incentives. And so there was a ton of public affairs. And then there was, this and that. But what came up consistently on a lot of the ones that I got a response was coaching and speaking, which was really interesting because I had always told myself stories that I suck at speaking in public. And one of the things that I do in my coaching is when people tell me that they suck at something, I say, do you think or do you know? And that's a Colin Paul saying, by the way, and that's another episode. But I ask them, do you think or no? And then they say, well, I think. And I said, well, how come do you think? And how much do you think that way? And or if you know, well, how do you know? Has someone told you? If someone pulled you off stage? Have you been booed? Have you, or is this just for me, mine was I could hear my voice crack when I talked. And so I just assumed everybody else could. And I assumed that everybody else could see my insides on my outsides, and they can't. Sometimes they can, but they can't most of the time. So again, I was really surprised. And that was one thing that was almost on every single one of my respondents that they sent back was that I should coach and do public speaking. And again, this is how naive I was, and how arrogant I was. I literally was like, well, shit, I love talking and I love telling people what to do. I'll go do that. That's coaching, right? And again, I found out that's not what coaching is. But again, my own ignorance led me down the path where I learned more. And so I started finding out. But I was in this group called Strong Women's Network. Shout out to Rose Fagler and that group during that time of lockdown. And so we had a diverse group of women in there. There were people that did all sorts of owned companies. Some were public relations owners and marketing. And so all of these things, I had this plethora of women that I could go, hey, and I basically tried on that job and I would interview them. Hey, what's it really like? Give me the skinny. And everybody should do that. I don't care what age you are, what job you're looking for. You should always find people out there and tell them, and ask them, tell me about this. What's the worst thing that you ever did in this job and what do you love about it? And one thing I realized is, people love to give advice, so they usually take you up on that offer, and they love to talk about themselves. So again, they'll give you this information. But these women were so wonderful, and so I just started to peel back that onion, and I ended up doing it. I ended up going to coaching. I went to NC State to get my certificate, and took classes there while I was working full time. And then I got my coaching hours at night and on weekends, and took my coaching certificate through ICF, International Coaching Federation, passed my test, and became a coach. And I couldn't go out and coach because I was working at a Big Four, and get paid. So I just bartered and things like that. But I did a ton of coaching, pro bono, things like that. And then I did coaching in Deloitte. And again, I tell you this story because none of this I understood to be what I was going to do. Like, there was no divine intervention and clear path. This was a lot of, and it wasn't like, okay, this is what I'm just going to do now too. I was literally running projects and doing all of this other stuff and living life over here like most of you probably are, you're probably juggling 5 or 6 things at once. And each of those things has a sub bullet list of 10 or 15 other things. And so I was doing all of this. And again, this is why there's not a box that's big enough. How do you fit a coach into a corporate, into this, into that, all into one little box? You've just got to be in multiple boxes. And that's okay. And so I just said, screw it, I'm not going to be in a box. But the mindset that came out of that was really about, this is a journey for me to find out. And so I really started going, every time I thought I knew, Joe, every time I thought I knew, it would like, okay, we're going to do this, and this is what I'm going to do. I would do it, and then I'd be like, ooh, I don't know. There's something over here, and there's something over there. And so what I realized is it's okay not to have a definitive plan, and just to keep moving, and just to keep going, and trust that you're in the right direction, and bounce things off of very smart people, and have that group around you. And that's what I did. But it was the mindset of, this is something I need to figure out. Like, no one else is going to figure it out. There's not a 5-step process. And I learned a lot about, again, there's a book called Break Your Own Rules. And I think I mentioned it last time on my podcast. It's a really good book for women to read. I thought it was great. Mary Davis Holt is a wonderful person. And her and her colleagues, our co-authors, I should say, it really talks about what we think we can do, and the box and the limitations of that. And when I started to read that book, and I started to really start to explore options, I ran a marathon, and I'll never forget the night before, very first marathon I ever ran, and we go to the pasta dinner, the carb dinner the night before.
Right.
And this was in Austin, Texas. It was the Motorola Marathon. And I show up, I go by myself, I show up, and I'm going to eat dinner, and I'm going to, do this marathon. And I'll never forget, the guy got up on stage, and we're eating, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just, I'm going to this marathon. And he said, what I am so amazed by is all the courageous first-timers. And we're all like, yeah, that's us, we're first-timers, we don't know. And he said, because I know I'm going to finish in 2 hours and some insane time. And he said the most terrifying words. He said, and you have no idea when you're going to finish. And I went, immediately in my head, I went, fuck. I mean, seriously, that's a pretty scary thing. I'm going to start something, I know where the destination maybe is going to be, but I have no idea when I'm getting there. But that was a very good life lesson. And that's what this HBIC process was for me. Was really about, I'm going to keep starting, and I'm going to keep going. I don't know exactly where the destination is or when it's going to be there. So there was no box to fit into.
It seems to me, I got kids that are in college and getting ready to go into college, that we do education almost the opposite of what you're saying, where we try stuff. It's like, no, you need to pick what you think you're going to like and study it for 8 years. And then I really hope you like it. Mm-hmm. Which seems terrible. Like, it seems like we used to have apprenticeships and stuff where it's like, go try 10 things and see which one you like before you commit to spending all of, in my case, Dad's money on college. But you said in the last podcast, you already have the power. Mm-hmm. Was it fear that kept you from trying new stuff, or was it just not realizing that you had the power to try all those things?
I think I mentioned this before about asking yourself and stopping and checking. I didn't have any check-ins. Right. I had always been, I did my career.
Go, busy.
Well, then I had always been asked to join a company, to get a promotion. And I had never said, oh, is this what I want? It was a better title, more responsibility, better company. It was always the next thing. And I didn't, now I think I hate saying this because it's like I'm talking about those kids, but the generations now are going, hey, what do I want?
Yeah.
And do I want to work 40 hours a week? Hell, do I want to not even 40. Do I want to work 60 hours a week? Let's be honest. It was more like 60 when I was coming up, if not more.
Right.
And if so, what am I getting in return? And I even coach on that now, but I didn't ask any of that. I just assumed that this is what I wanted.
Yeah, for all the flack that generation gets, I think that's something they're doing right. Like,
and I'll tell you where I think this is, I think it scares the hell out of my generation and the older generation, because you don't talk back.
right.
I remember I was, an example of that is I got on a call one day, and my buddy Anthony called me, and we were talking, and he was like talking about how this young guy in the team had come up, and he had told him, well, I'm going to go work for so-and-so for 50, he like didn't want to work the weekend or something. And he's like, well, you kind of need to. And he's like, well, no, I kind of don't. And he couldn't, and he was like, well, you're going to go over there and work for like 50 cents more and not work and he was like, yeah. And that was such a foreign concept to us,
Right.
that you're going to, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And I think what I have learned from the generation that have come after me is ask a hell of a lot more questions. Why are you not asking questions? And really, you can do whatever the hell you want to when you want to.
Yeah. I think the generation, like I grew up in the 80s, right? And so whenever my parents went out to eat or something like that, nobody asked me what I wanted. I was just along for the ride. And that has completely shifted. And I think that's why this generation is smartly asking that question. Like, well, what do you want in areas where we never thought to? Because it was like, you were saying, like, I think I said, just being busy. Sometimes it's not about just being busy. You're doing somebody else's thing when you work for somebody else. Mm-hmm. You're helping them fulfill their mission. Mm-hmm. And that's, you get rewarded for being good at helping them do their thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost counterintuitive to being like, well, what do you want? What kind of question is that? I got work to do.
Yeah. Well, and also I think what's interesting about that is not only did we not get asked what we wanted, we were fucking grateful that we got it. And you better check before you say you want seconds. And if you didn't eat, I'll never forget. I mean, how many of us grew up with, there are starving kids in Africa, you clean your plate, young lady.
Right.
And now I'm not saying, and I think what's funny too is, again, we look at this generation, or I should say but I hear a lot of these generations that after her, and they're just ungrateful and they expect everything. Well, have we ever sat there and thought, what would be different if I expected everything?
Right. I think we really get down on the upcoming generation for the word entitled.
Yeah.
But that's also an empowering thing to think, oh, I'm entitled to happiness. I'm entitled to certain things.
I coach people. This is literally what I coach. I remember my stepson Brady lived with us. I can't remember, a couple summers ago. Well, last summer actually. And we were talking about internship. And I said, what kind of internship you want? And da-da-da-da. And I coach people on this about, no, you want to shoot for the sun. And then you don't get the sun, so then you get the star. Oh, you don't get the star. Okay, then you hit a cloud. Okay, then you climb down. Oh, then you hit a tree, and then you come down, and then you land on the ground. But we all know in corporate negotiation, you ask for what you want, add 50%, because they're going to negotiate your ass down. So why are you starting on the ground level?
Right.
So I don't know that it's so much entitled. And if it is entitled, where you have this, entitled means you owe it, whereas there's a whole different mindset around, I am entitled to happiness and I find my happiness this way, versus anybody owes it. You still got to work hard, but you might as well ask for it. And I think that's going back to the question about how I got into this mindset. I never asked those questions. So that's when I started to be okay about asking the questions and getting comfortable that there might be answers that meant I needed to leave my years at Big Four, that I needed to take a different direction. Okay, and then leave that title behind and leave all of that behind and go off like I've done. And that's kind of a scary thing. But I will tell you, when you're going through this, and if you're going to start exploring, set things around you to help you do that. And what I mean by that, and I don't mean, yeah, you can have your therapy or whatever, but like I like little speed bumps in the road, okay? And I call them potholes because they kind of jar me a little bit. But on your way to work, everybody's got a pothole that they forget about and they hit, We know it's there. So I put in my playlist, in my routine playlist, I started putting in songs from Jen Wigmore, HBIC, Elle King. My husband was like, hey, Elle King, blah, 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 blah. I had never, again, I'm late to the party on a lot of things. I hadn't heard Elle King. I had heard her, but I hadn't, I was busy. So I hadn't listened to her. And started listening to her, American Sweetheart. And I started getting this, like, wait a minute, these are rules that I don't need to live by. And then the other part about being an HBIC is not only, I'm not going to live by your rules, I'm going to make my own. Well, then that means that my rules better be based on good foundation. And that means, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in this episode, is, my foundation is basically 4 areas of my life: my personal, my professional, my spiritual, and my physical. And that means, what are my beliefs? What are these things that keep me grounded in this? Because again, it goes back, and I said this in the first part, and it's a very central part of being accountable and self-accountable, is that if I have a headache, you cannot take my aspirin. I have to do that. I have to figure out what I need. You can help me, you can encourage me, but ultimately I have to do it. And so again, going back to that power, I have it. Maybe I need to learn. Maybe I haven't heard of this before. But again, I put those things around me so that I was going through this time. I had those little bolts of energy, and listening to Elle King and Jen Wigmore. And, here I am, a 53-year-old woman, throwing down on that.
So when you started asking yourself the challenging questions, like what's going to make you happy, things like that, were you quick to identify one of those four corners, personal, professional, spiritual, or physical, that you really struggled to balance? Did one really pop out as like, oh, this could be a big problem?
Well, that's a can of worms and a half. But first of all, there's no such thing as balance for me. It's a rhythm. To me,
balance implies that you would have to do everything perfectly equally. So if you got four things, 25% of all your time must be spent on it. So unrealistic.
And that's so not. And again, it goes back to can we have it all? And it's like, well, what's all? What's all for you I don't want that. Like, I don't want that. I don't want an 80-hour work week or a 60-hour work week during busy season. So again, but what I think the question that you're asking is there one that I really struggled with that was really glaring? And it was work. And I had ignored it for a long time. And funny thing is if I'm really honest, I had been looking to leave my industry and what I'd done for quite some time. And I just couldn't. I was almost hired so many times, and it just never, it always fell through. And thank God for unanswered prayers. I think that's a Garth Brooks song. But because I kept getting the door slammed in my face because that door was not supposed to be opened. There's a reason why some doors are locked. And so it was work. And going back again to what I had tied up in my work, which was my ego, which was I had done all this, I had built all this, and oh my gosh, I'm going to go have to build something new. But there's also this lightness when you release everything that weighs you down. There's this lightness, and then you can go build what you want to go build. And I can always go back. It's not like I left the industry and left my brain behind. I still listen to Bloomberg, and I was at last Friday talking about the younger generation. Last Friday I was on this NCEDA, that's North Carolina Economic Development Association's Career Trek Roundtable. And shout out to Liz Dobbins and everybody over there. They did a great job. Secretary Lilly came in and actually spoke so down to earth about economic development, and tons of the kids were there. I said, kids, I got to quit doing that. Young adults. It's just so wrong. I'm sorry. And, I'm not sorry. Thank you for being flexible with my wording, I should say, instead of I'm sorry. So they were all there, and we got to talk about what it's like to be in the industry. So it's not like I left that industry and I just lost all my marbles and I don't have any cred. I've earned that cred. And that's one thing I think I didn't realize until I had let go is that I still had my cred. Like, you don't leave it and then just go. I mean, you got to stay up on it. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I've only been gone for 6 months or whatever, but in 5 years, maybe I don't have the same cred, but I still have that. I have those war wounds. I have those lessons. And I think that really is about letting that go, being able to build something up and building that self-accountability and giving yourself that openness to do that. So again, that's kind of how I found the mindset. And then I took the action. So much about being an HBIC is taking action. Taking action when uncertain. And I'm going to say this to any men out there listening and any woman out there listening that has a man, you're going to sit there and shake your head. Women make great leaders, but they also make badass wingmen. And what's really interesting is I told you there's some myths about that I'm going to break in here that I broke kind of in my head during this time frame to get this mindset. Was one very much was that we are one-dimensional. You know, women are emotional creatures, and we just have so many feelings, and we just, you know, we're just difficult and all of that. And there's a beauty to women, and I'll never forget this. My husband would always go, he'd be like, "This is the logical answer. You're not being logical." And I remember one night we were sitting there, and he was wrong. He was wrong. He had a logical process, but he was wrong. And I couldn't articulate it. And I'll loop back around, so just hang there with me. I know I'm kind of off, but I'll loop back around. So I sat there, and I couldn't figure it out what it was. So the next morning, I was still pissed off. And I knew he was wrong. And so how many women have sat there in that position? And I'm a processor, so it takes me a while to processing. So that morning, Google, because we had Google in our house, I had this conversation. It's like, can you reach a incorrect answer using a logical process? Because I didn't know how to come back at him, you know? And because he kept saying, well, you're just emotional and blah, blah, blah. And it said, yeah, if your hypothesis is wrong, if your assumptions are wrong, you can reach a logical conclusion that is incorrect. And I was like, gotcha. So I told him about it later, but I bring that up because I love logic. I love business strategy. I love all of that. And I happen to be emotional.
From a farm kid to college, nanny to pro boxer to boardrooms, Christine Spratley has lived a life that defies convention. Whether she's talking about fuck fear, doing this scared is still doing it, or beating the boys club, their game, our rules, your style. She delivers sharp wit, real talk, and a fearless approach to leadership, success, and personal growth. After hearing Christine, your audience will have a plan and unapologetically run until apprehended toward their fulfillment. Book her now at christinespratley.com.
They talk about emotional intelligence. Seriously. Women have had emotional intelligence. Ladies, we've had this since we've had our first period. We were figuring out how to regulate our emotions since like 10 years old, where we went, holy shit, I'm leaking. How the fuck do I get out of this room? Oh my God. And we found the back of the wall, and we call it the back wall scoot, where you just kind of keep your back to the wall and you scoot out. We were regulating that stuff, like seriously. So that myth that women are one-dimensional, that we don't like logic, I believe, for me anyway, I love logic. I love coming to a logical conclusion, but I use emotions to give me context around. And now they call it emotional intelligence. And if you understand emotional intelligence, I coach on it all the time. It's being able to read the room, read people's emotions, flex and ebb, regulate your own. We've been doing that. Any woman that has gone through puberty in high school with other women, we have gone through that. We have regulated that. And part of that, owning that for me, was understanding, oh, I'm not just a one-dimensional person. I'm not a one-dimensional entity. I have all these entities, and this is how they fit together. So when you ask about the mindset and this process and that pillar, was there one out of whack? It was my job, but it was also the perspectives and the beliefs that I had about the box that I needed to fit into that job. To be really honest,
your hypothesis of why your job was so important was wrong. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, it was that, but it was also, for instance, I remember the last part of my job, they came at me and they said, because in Big Four, it's all about revenue. I don't care what anybody tells you, it's all about revenue. And most jobs, it is about revenue. And it should be because they need revenue to stay in business, okay? And I hated sales. I always told myself I hated sales. Well, I've been selling all my whole life. First date, I was, we're always positioning ourselves. If you've taught a toddler to eat broccoli, you can freaking do corporate politics. Seriously. Think about it. Think about what it takes. So anyway, sorry, I'll slow down. But getting back to your point, just about the hypothesis and about understanding the process. And that helped me realize I'm not one-dimensional. I had always told myself I couldn't sell. And I remember this 2024 was the year I said, I'm going to intentionally participate in my life. Intentional participation. I use words, not resolutions. Intentional participation was my resolution for that year. And I sat there and they were giving me slack about, you're great and the clients love you and they'd do anything for you and blah, 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 but you need more revenue and you need to go get new revenue. And so I was like, all right, you're going to intentionally participate. You're going to find out how to sell. And I had all these, take action. And I remember got this call with a buddy of mine, Brandon, and he said, Christine, I don't know who told you that you couldn't sell, but somewhere along the line you bought that bullshit, so you don't. And going back to your thing, was my assumption, was the way that I looked at my job wrong, was all of that. Part of it was. I was selling like you sell. I was selling like accountants sell. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not an accountant. I was told once that, an accounting firm is like black and white. Christine, you're a color TV. And so I had to learn how to do that. So for a while, I thought it was just my job. And I thought, well, I just need to learn how to sell. So I learned how to sell like I sell. And then I said, well, I'll coach within the framework of my company. And I tried to fill all these buckets. And then it became, I needed more. And a lot of times we hear, you're too much. Or your bucket's too big.
Spread too thin. Yeah.
What?
Spread too thin.
Spread too thin, but then you're too much. You're too loud. You're too this, too that. And my response to that is maybe they need to go find less. Maybe you need a bigger room. Maybe you need a bigger stage. And for me, I needed a muzzle that came off. I needed to be able to say and do things the way that I wanted to do them once I found, and that meant my job changed. And that meant I needed to step out on my own and literally start HBIC advisors. And the mission behind that, of doing that, was I don't want other women to wait as long as I do to go get their teeth cleaned about their life of fulfillment and what makes them happy. I want them to do it as soon as possible, as often as possible, and keep checking in with themselves and take that on and take that mantle and go, oh, wow, what I did yesterday, is it still fulfilling to me? And if it's not, maybe there's something I can do that's different. And I think for me, going back again to the 4 areas in my life, that's touched on all the areas. My job, my personal relationships. Being responsible for me means I may have to leave certain friendships. I may have to leave certain personal relationships. Personal relationships mean to change because I'm a very giving person, but I may give too much. Well, it's not too much. I'm just not getting anything back. So I'll give just the same amount just to someone who'll give something back. So then you might ask, well, the other 2, we've talked about professional, we've talked about personal, spiritual. That's a huge part of people's life, that centeredness, that fulfillmentness. Some people get it in religion, some people get it elsewhere. But again, if you're not checking in, and all of these ebb and flow, but if you don't understand how they intersect with each other, then one's going to rule at the detriment of another one, because they're not all in alignment. And I think that, going back to a question we asked earlier, Joe, was about, why people don't look underneath the covers. Because then it's like that, you pull that sweater, that thread, and then things start to unravel. But at the end of it unraveling, you have a ball of yarn. You can just reknit a freaking new sweater. And so you just put it all back together. And that takes time. And that takes vulnerability. And that means you're out there without a wire sometimes. Or a net, I'm sorry. And so I think that is why we don't do it. But again, all of those are the 4 parts. And that's why you don't get into a box. Because they don't all fit in the same box at the same time. I'm going to throw EY under the bus a little bit here. I'm not throwing EY under the bus. What I'm doing is just repeating something that was in the newspaper. And they did, after I left, they did a training session for up-and-coming leaders, women, female leaders. And there's a famous quote in the session about men's minds are like waffles. They compartmentalize. Women's are like pancakes, and they just run all over. And first of all, we all know that's offensive. I don't even need to deal with that. But I started thinking about that. And to me, it's not that women's minds aren't like waffles. It's just that we have more compartments. We have compartments on compartments on compartments. Because we are connecting all of these contexts around the situation. I guarantee you walk out of a business meeting and you'll have your facts. Men will go boom, 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 boom. And then next time, guys, why don't you go ask the women, okay, tell me about the interaction, the conversation that everybody had and their body language and all that stuff that nobody picked up on because they were doing the facts. See, for me, I had to look at all of that, take all of that in, and get the facts. That's how I sat in the meetings. And so, again, I'm hitting home this myth that we don't have a box. We've got lots of boxes. And then we come in and we put them all together. And that's the beauty of being a woman and how we grow and how we function. And that's why we can do so much at so many times. Now, granted, it gets confusing. And if our pillars aren't on good foundation, I can get kind of nuts. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It took me till I was like 54 to figure out what I was fulfilled with. Now, granted, I was fulfilled along the way, but when I wasn't for a long time, I didn't look at that. So learn from me. Don't wait. Ask. But try not to be dismissive of all your boxes. A friend, Mary Beth, went to lunch with me one day, and she said, Christine, it's like a spider web. And she said they all connect. And when you network with people or when you're personal, and it all connects them, and you see this big, huge spider web, but you just build it, and people build their own little lines to connect. And that's really what it's like for me as an HBIC. And that's the beauty of it, is there's all these new things that it can be. Because it isn't just a waffle with 4 boxes. So on that note, I think I've pretty much busted some myths. Don't you, Joe?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I would like to hear, though, you kept saying over and over again, you need to check in. What are some good questions that you can ask yourself to check in?
Check-ins for me are, again, I talked about this earlier about your beliefs. And when I go, ooh, when I react. And just spending time with that. And just going, okay, well, what's that mean? What do I believe? Does this work for me? Do I still like this? And this could be anything from a job to this team to this project. It could be anything from this marriage, this relationship, the way we do things in our house. this could mean anything from my weight, the way I look. Again, all these facets, because this could be my relationship with my God or my higher power. But when I check in, it's literally how many, and too often, I hear this a lot when I coach, is I'll do that as soon as I get done with, and then the list starts. I'll catch up on the weekend. And I read this quote about, and I'm going to get it wrong because I don't have it in front of me, but it's basically, everybody has time. It's about priorities. And one of the biggest things about checking in is, do I have either a system around me to check in with that helps me on a regular basis? Regular could mean once a month, could be once a week. For me, what that looks like in a healthy manner is it means that I have what I call my OG mugshot crew, the women that have known me, the women that know my shit, the women that know when I'm off kilter and I can't see it. It means that I do counseling. I think why would you not? I mean, we go to a doctor to get fit or to go get our health checked. We go to a gym guy to get us fit. We, do all this. Why would we not go make sure that we're aligning our lives in a psychological way? So those are the things that I do to check in. And when I start becoming, I'll do it later. Great thing about I'll do it tomorrow is tomorrow never really comes. And then for me, I end up down the road and then it becomes an emergency, or in my case, I had some medical issues. But I tell on myself and I give people, I'm going to introduce a concept. And this is one thing that has helped me. A lot of times I think that I'm checking in, and I call it the asleep, dreaming, you're awake kind of theory, where, oh yeah, I'm good. We're good. I'm checking in. All right, good. But I have this deal that I do with my girlfriends, and it's called the toss. And it is when someone sees something in my life, they go, hey, can I toss? Or when I see something in someone else's life, and it may be just something they said or whatever, and I'm just like, I don't know about that. And I don't know if it's right, wrong, indifferent, but they'll go, yeah, toss. And they receive it, or I receive the toss as information. It's information. Hey, I don't know if you saw this, Christine, but you just said this, this, and this. You've said I'm sorry like 50 times this week about shit that you never apologized for. What's going on? Or, when I was wanting really hard to stay at my job, a couple of my friends were like, listen, you say you're filling your buckets, but you don't seem happy. You say you're coaching enough, but at your job, but you just don't seem happy. I actually had a team member tell me, Christine, you don't seem as engaged. And it was at a toss. And this was somebody that I oversaw. And he said, hey, can I toss? And I said, sure. And he was like, all right, well, I don't see you engaged. And this is the type of project where you would be all over what's going on. And so sometimes the check-in is literally about the people that you put around you that go, here's a toss. Now, I have to tell you the other rules of the toss. The other rules are, for me anyway, is my girlfriends and I, if I say, hey, can I toss? And they say, I don't feel like it. You go, okay, I'll pack that up for later. You have that right. Or I can say, yeah, you can toss, but I don't want to talk about it. Just toss it. Or you can toss and talk. So it's a good way to kind of just go, and I don't judge them for what they say. I mean, it's just a toss. I'm just going to throw this out there. Fit? Nah. Does it work? Maybe. I don't know. And I think that's really important because sometimes I can't see my blind spots. But if I'm not checking in, if I'm waiting till next month to get with my girlfriends, or I'm waiting, or I'm putting it off until, maybe I need it today. And it could just be a real little shift in how I think, or it could be a little shift in how I work with the kids or my approach. It could just be one little thing to check in. But when I get out of the habit of doing something, I don't like to start. I'm not a starter. I'm a continuer. Starting's hard for me. But once I get going and once I have that in my life and other things to help me around the way, I talked about the potholes, putting them with stuff, I like to say that it's like, and I don't play video games, but from what I gather, you can get these, you can shoot something and get more stuff. You can get better weapons or you can get more energy or something like that. And to me, it's like that. You put these things in your life that give you feedback, give you energy, give you joy, give you information to help you check in with yourself. And if you're not, you may want to take a look. When I wasn't doing that, I was really exhausted all the time, and I was really unhappy. And I did it for a while, but after a while leads into years sometimes. And that's really a part of being an HBIC where I've just put this, I've quit being accountable to myself. I've quit growing. I remember I was in Austin, Texas. I was broke, and I was a runner, and land development, worked as a land development person, and running plans, building plans, and site plans. And I was sitting out, and it was when I smoked. And I was sitting out at the front stoop of my little place, and I didn't have any money, so I had Nova. I don't even know if people know what the Nova channel is. I know not very many people nowadays know, but it's basically a public service channel. And I don't know why it was on, but I didn't have a channel changer, and it went off, and I was reading the paper, smoking a cigarette, drinking my coffee, and the TV was in the other room, and this preacher lady came on, and I was too lazy to get up and turn it. And she said, and she was Southern preacher. So, black Southern preacher, And she was like, she's like, they got through all their hallelujahs and stuff. Cause I was raised Catholic, so we didn't do that. We didn't talk during church. And they were up dance and stuff. And she would say, now, and she says, when you're hooked up to the machine, and it goes like this, and you just boom, boom, and then it goes like this, and it goes, and she goes, but the last thing you want is it to go like this. And so she said, basically, that's how life is. You should check in. It should go like this. It should go like this. But the last thing you want is to go like this. And sometimes when I'm not really engaged in owning my stuff as an HBIC, and I'm not checking in, my life is on autopilot. And I just think I'll just keep just like this, and we'll catch up then. And that's when I'm not. I mean, my life is like this, but me checking in is like this. I'm not doing it. And I can't think of a better place to be than checking in and being, what's under this? And for me now, being on a lot of the other side of it, there's not a door I don't want to open. And part of it, I think, has to do with, I was talking with someone the other day, part of it has to do with my age. I'm 54. And I'm closer to that end than I am to that end. And so time is of the essence. So I do want to be the head bitch in charge. I do want to do that. And I want to do it as much as I can, as often as I can. And I don't lean in. I know we talk about leaning in sometimes. I jump the fuck in. And then I can get in, figure it out. And if I don't like it, I get the hell out. And like I said before, I don't empower anybody. I mean, you got that power. We just got to find people around it to check in and make sure it's still the pilot light's on. And sometimes they blow it up into this huge raging bonfire that's so beautiful and magnificent. We've seen those women that do that. So look at all those four sides of your life and really check in. I want to address something. I'm going to shift here if you don't mind, Joe. I want to address something. I said personal, professional, spiritual, and physical. And I know some people talk about professional, and some of my listeners will be, well, I don't have a job, I stay at home, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just going to call this out. Professional, in that sense of the word, is you have a profession. A profession is you are a stay-at-home mom, or you are a caretaker. May not get paid for that in dollar bills, although you should, and that is an episode that will come up because I have a whole thought process on that. But also being a professional is doing something at an elite level, at a skillful level. You can't tell me that moms aren't skillful. You can't tell me you can't project manage. You can't tell me you aren't in crisis management, change management, implementation. You be implementing all damn day long. And improvisation, we have seen the pivot and the reinvention all day long. So anybody who is thinking that professional is just, I need a briefcase and I need to work at a big 4 accounting firm, no. A professional is how you show up with the skill that you have. And I know that there's some teams in the corporate environment right now that could use a few moms. There's a few CEOs that I wish could have a conversation with their moms or with our moms. I'd love to get them, set straight. And the last thing is a professional is someone who doesn't do it as just a pastime. And the last time I checked, most of us that were living as a mom, and for me it was being a stepmom, I didn't do it as a pastime. I was fully invested. So don't dismiss that element, because someday you may want to go into the working world as far as a corporate working environment, and you have all those skills. You just need to repackage them and put a nice little label on it, and you've got ChatGPT to help you do that nowadays, so it's fine. But again, don't be dismissive of what you provide and the skill level that you have. I think we've covered the 4. And I think I want to talk about, actually I do want to talk about some of the homework, because we're going to wind up now. And some of the homework that came out of this episode that we're just going to, again, homework is take it or leave it. Or do like my kids do and use ChatGPT to do it. But as a coach, I can't not do homework. So the homework for this session really is, what boxes are you in? And if you don't know, ask your girlfriends. And what boxes? Where are the edges? And what doesn't feel comfortable? Where are you too much? And just, I know some of you won't want to ask that question because you've heard me say, well, maybe if I'm too much, maybe they need to go find less, or I need to go find a bigger stage. I'm going to offer you this for today and going forward. And I tell this to people I coach. You can stop at any point in the journey you want to. You can change your mind, and you can always turn around and go back. So ask the question. You don't have to go any farther than ask the question and answer it. And just see what comes up. That's the other thing, is give yourself that grace to just explore without knowing when you're going to end the marathon, and just see where it takes you. Give yourself that gift of really going, what if I wasn't in this box? Joe, did you see the movie Barbie?
Yeah.
Do you remember when she didn't even know they were trying to get her in that box, and she was running around and they were trying to put her in the box, and then she'd run out and that's what it's like sometimes, I think. It's like, I don't even know that I'm in the box and that I should stay there, and so I run out. But there are times when I've put myself in the box, I've put other women in a box, or I'm in an environment that has me in a box, and that's why I'm uncomfortable. Women have a great thing. We do. It's called intuition, and I never understood that. And the best way I can do it, this is not a technical term, because someone will fact check me, I'm sure. Good for you. But for me, it's that, we talked about it before about the beliefs or whatever, but it's that, You know, like when your dog looks at you, you go, huh? You go, huh? Like Scooby-Doo used to go, huh? Mm-hmm. That's what it's like. I really do. I could sit there and go, what? And it makes you just, And it's just, you can't explain it, but then it just makes sense. So just sit with that when you answer these questions. What are my boxes? Do I have enough of them? Do I want to be in all of them? You know, who gets more? Who gets less? How do they align? There's no right or wrong. This is just a podcast. Just have fun with it and explore it, because you deserve to know what fulfills you. But only you can do the work to find that out and to ask those questions. So I think that closes us out. You've got your homework, and these are good questions to ask for your friends, your girlfriends. Get a glass of wine, do that. My friends, I'd be doing it over a football game. So, you know, but literally anywhere. And until next time, ladies, tubs, have a great weekend.
Thanks for tuning in to Fear with Christine Spratley. Living like a head in charge. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, tell her what topics you want to hear, and share this episode with someone who could use a pantry full of boldness in their life. Remember, life isn't about aging with grace. It's about aging with mischief, audacity, and having a damn good story to tell. So show up, take action, and keep saying fear.